New York City ready to reopen. Finally, Governor Cuomo is moving up the reopening date for the city indoor dining to today instead of Sunday. Restaurants can now resume service at 25% capacity. Joining me right now is the former CEO of CKE Restaurants, former Labor Secretary nominee, and the capitalist comeback author, Andy Puzder. Andy, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for being
Great
here.
To see you, Maria.
Well, it's been a long time coming, but the governor is moving up the opening date to today, going into this weekend. What is your take on the money lost and the revenue lost? How quickly will these companies be able to gain it back?
Well, they're not going to gain it back very quickly at 25% occupancy. The percentage really should be much higher. 25% is arbitrary. There's no scientific data that would support 25%. There's more data supporting 100%. It's going to help some restaurants. But look, these restaurants on the verge of collapse. It's not going to help them much. I think that this is another act of political cowardice by the governor in New York, who's very much afraid that he's going to be criticized for making yet another mistake in the fight against COVID. But the percentage is too low. Thank God they're opening. Thank God they'll get a chance to open the doors. But it needs to be more, and it needs to be fast.
So how many restaurants would you say have gone bust because of what they've been faced with this year? I mean, clearly we needed rules during the lockdown, but look at how Florida has really flourished, Andy. And then you compare that to New York, and even the number of, the mortality numbers are lower in Florida, and they've been open.
Well, Governor DeSantis has done an incredible job with the fight against COVID. If anybody should have written a book, it's Governor DeSantis. But the National Restaurant Association came out with numbers about a month and a half ago that said 110,000 restaurants at that point had closed permanently, and another 500,000 were in trouble. And all of that was before they shut down outdoor dining in California. I had a very good friend of mine, Molly, who runs Molly's in Santa Barbara, California, where you could be open outdoors, 365 days a year. Call me in tears because she couldn't pay her personal rent, let alone rent on the restaurant or employees because of these shutdowns. So we've had, I would say, at least 150,000 restaurants closed permanently, and it's a disaster for the people that own those restaurants and for the people that work in those restaurants.
Yeah, it's true. I'm looking at a report right now that says at least 1,000 have closed permanently in New York City alone. Let me switch gears, ask you about what's coming out of Washington and how it impacts the restaurant sector. House Speaker Pelosi is promising a federal minimum wage hike to $15 an hour. This increase, she says, will be included in the House's stimulus package the next time. We are expecting some $4 trillion in a second package coming. She also believes the relief bill, this that they're talking about now, will be passed by the end of the month, signed into law before March 14th, when key unemployment programs are set to expire. Andy, your reaction to what is to come in this stimulus package, including that minimum wage?
Well, I mean, I tell you, you just got to look at when Larry Summers and Phil Gramm agree on something, there's a problem. And they both agree that the stimulus bill could set up hyperinflation and tank the economy. So that's number one. But even putting that aside, if you're looking at the White House has come out and said, the National Council of Economic Advisors, 2 members, came out and said what their goal is full employment. So how do they plan on getting there? Well, one is this stimulus. And by the way, stimulus doesn't lead to, you're not going to open a new restaurant or a new grocery store based on a stimulus bill because the stimulus is going away. To get to Pelosi's points, how on earth do you get to full employment? How do you create jobs if you discourage businesses from hiring people by raising the minimum wage? And CBO just came out and said the $15 minimum wage would kill 1.4 million jobs. So you're discouraging businesses from hiring, and then you're providing unemployment insurance benefits so generous that it's more profitable, it's more economically sensible for people to stay home than to work. So you're discouraging businesses from hiring, you're discouraging people from working, and then your claim is you're trying to create full employment. This approach is absurd. It won't help restaurants. It won't help anybody.
I mean, as a former restaurant head yourself, when you've got more costs, higher expenses, to being forced to pay some employees $15 an hour, what do you do? Do you cut jobs? How do you ensure that you could, have enough profit and enough to pay everyone? I mean, tell me these situations that you faced in the past.
Well, you do just what the CBO said. You don't hire people. You don't hire as many people. You raise your prices, which increases consumers' costs, and you don't grow because you don't have the money to grow.
Yeah.
So you've really got to pull back to try and keep the doors open. And restaurants across the country right now, they are surviving by the skin of their teeth. When your business is locked down, you don't do a whole lot of business. So to raise the cost of employees at a time like this is absurd.
Yeah, because you're living on cash flow. Liz Peek, jump in.
Yep.
Hi, Andy. Good morning. I've been interested to a lot of restaurants are surviving in my area by takeout, but nobody's really doing takeout alcohol. And it seemed to me that a lot of restaurants basically needed alcohol sales, particularly wine sales and high-priced cocktails, to even make it. How are they surviving without that ingredient in their overall mix? I don't get that.
Well, you're absolutely right. Normal food costs for restaurants are about 35% of sales. The food costs for alcohol is about 15% of sales. So profit on alcohol is really, really positive. And a lot of restaurants charge less for food because they make so much on their alcoholic beverages. So when you take those sales out of the mix, you make it a whole lot more difficult for sit-down restaurants to survive, even with takeout. So it's a huge problem. And as I said, these restaurants are not surviving. If you think your local restaurant's going to make it through this because they closed their doors, you're wrong. We need to do something to help these people, and we need to do something fast. And the thing to do is open the doors. We need to do what we're doing in Florida and here in Tennessee. We need to let restaurants open.
Before you go, President Biden nominating California Labor Secretary Julie Su for U.S. Deputy Labor Secretary. Su oversees California's unemployment system, which has been hit by allegations of widespread fraud throughout the pandemic, including more than $11 billion in jobless benefits fraud. Another $19 billion in potentially fraudulent claims is currently under investigation. And she's going to be nominated for the Deputy Labor Secretary. Your thoughts?
Well, apparently, if you're a progressive, you really don't get punished for much. You get rewarded even when you screw up. I mean, California has $120 billion in unemployment benefits paid in California since the beginning of the pandemic. And that's about 25% of the total paid out in the United States. Well, they don't have 25% of the population. So you've got a problem right there. But then when you find out that 1,700 checks were sent to the same address for these government benefits, when you find out that somebody sent a $21,000 check to Dianne Feinstein, nobody was watching the store. The money was running out of the door and nobody was guarding the cash register. And you would think somebody that was going to be Assistant Secretary of Labor would be on top of that. Pat Pizzella has been the Assistant Secretary the last few years. He was an incredibly effective guy, very competent, did a wonderful job. To replace him with somebody that couldn't even run the job in California, I mean, it's absurd. Look, this administration is doing more harm to an economy that should be coming back gangbusters, after this pandemic. You do a lot more business when your doors are open than when they're closed. And we're going to open our doors this year as more people get vaccinated. We should have an incredible economic year, and they're doing everything they can possibly think of to stop it.
By the way, I should point out the massive influence campaign that has been taking place in California by Communist China. The Communist Party has certainly had individuals within certain parts of California that have cozied up to people like Eric Swalwell, Dianne Feinstein, Barbara Boxer, pointing that out because the CCP is certainly trying to influence areas of this country and get inside some of our most important institutions. Andy, it's good to see you this morning. Thank you so much.
Good to see you,
Andy
Maria,
Puzder,
and Dagan and Liz, too.
On all of that. All right, great.